Can you believe it? A man who spent his whole life believing only in statistics and evidence was saved by Bigfoot in the deep jungle, and what changed him was not fear, but kindness. In the spring of 1990, deep in the mountains of Central Oregon, Graham, a middle-aged man of strict logic and quiet solitude, set out on a solo hike. He wasn't looking for mystery. He was looking for peace. But what he found changed him forever. Strange signs began early. Trail markers moved, hushed warnings from locals, and an eerie silence that fell like a blanket deep in the woods. Then came the moment. He slipped, broke his ankle, and as the sun dipped below the trees, he prepared to face the worst. But instead of a predator, something else emerged from the shadows. A young Bigfoot, barely 4 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown fur, with eyes full of curiosity. Not fear, not threat. What happened next defied everything Graham thought he knew about the world. The creature tended his wound with chewed herbs, stayed by his side through the night, and warded off something or someone lurking in the dark. That night, something far greater than survival happened. A skeptic met compassion. A myth met truth. And Graham? He never returned to that trail. But he never forgot the touch of a hand smaller than his, guiding him back to a world that now felt deeper, wider, and more mysterious than logic ever allowed. Now I want to ask you something, dear listener. Where are you watching from tonight? What is your name, and how far do you think this story might travel? Let's make sure tales like this don't get lost in the woods. Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and help us build a community that still believes in Bigfoot, in wonder, and in the quiet magic of kindness. To all of you watching, thank you. And from the bottom of my heart, good evening wherever you are. Graham Sutter never chased ghosts, never searched for miracles or signs or anything that couldn't be measured, filed, or put under oath. If someone mentioned Bigfoot, he'd nod politely, lips tight like a zippered bag, and let them talk themselves out of breath. It was the same expression he used when people told him angels had saved them from car accidents, or how their dogs understood English. A slow, quiet disapproval, like a man watching a child play too close to the fire. He didn't hate wonder, he just didn't have room for it anymore. A size 12 hiking boot pressed into damp earth. A small spray of wet pine needles lifted at the heel as he stepped. The forest floor beneath him gave a soft crunch, like sponge cake left too long in the rain. Spring still clung to the higher valleys of the Ochocos, though the grass was beginning to yellow near the edges. The smell was heavy. Wet bark, fern rot, moss like old velvet. Somewhere behind him, a raven screamed just once, sharp and disapproving. Graham paused. Not for the bird, but to check the map in his hand. Folded in quarters, creased from habit. He didn't need it. He'd walked this trail 2 years ago. But habit made him double-check. Compass, orientation, trail markers, everything had to make sense. He had stopped in Mitchell that morning, a breakfast place that served burnt eggs and coffee strong enough to float a nail. Locals in denim and oil-stained hats watched him with the same glance people reserve for strangers who ask for directions to places they shouldn't be going. When the waitress asked where he was headed, he told her, casual as ever, thinking of hiking up past Sandstone Ridge. Loop around west of the basin, might cut through Dead Mare Hollow if it's dry enough. She blinked. That deep? A man behind him muttered something about folks not learning. But the comment didn't stick. He was used to that kind of talk. What did rattle him, just for a second, was the old woman by the window. She hadn't said a word until then, just stared at her dry toast and coffee like they were a test. But when he mentioned Dead Mare, her head lifted slowly. "Don't step past the line," she said. Her voice cracked like dry wood. Her eyes didn't meet his. "They don't like that." He turned to her, confused. "Who?" But she only looked back at the trees outside, like she'd already said too much, or like she wasn't really speaking to him at all. He paid the bill, tipped too much, and left. Later, when the wind shifted and he smelled pine sap thick in the air, he thought of her again. Not the words, just the way she said them. Not a warning, a remembering. It wasn't belief that drove him up into the woods that week. It was the opposite. Graham hiked like a man measuring blood pressure. He wasn't chasing anything, just making sure he still existed, that the machine still ran. Since the incident 3 years ago, he never used the word scam, but it boiled under his tongue. He had sworn off anything spiritual. His younger sister had dragged him into it, said she'd found a healer up near Bend who could cleanse grief after his divorce. Cleanse it, like it was a rash. $4,000, and 2 months later, he was broke, humiliated, and angrier than he'd ever been. That kind of anger settles deep, cold, becomes policy. That's when the rules began. Eat clean, hike twice a year, avoid conversations that begin with, "Do you believe?" The trailhead was marked by a wooden post, half-rotted at the base. The carved lettering had faded, eaten by time and weather, but Graham knew the name: Dry Timber Trail. 21 miles of winding switchbacks, 3 unreliable streams, and one perfect clearing near the ridge that caught the last light of day like a secret. As he moved, something itched in the back of his skull, a small discrepancy. He looked again at the trail marker. The arrow pointing west was askew, off by a few degrees. Nothing dramatic, but it had been straight the last time he came. He squatted down, looked at the post. No signs of rot underneath. The dirt around its base looked churned. Maybe someone had moved it. But why? No footprints, no tire marks. Still, something about it bugged him. He took a picture with his phone, not to post anywhere, just for record. Deeper in, the woods thickened. Pines pressed close. The wind dropped to a murmur. Ferns taller than his knee rose like green flame on either side of the trail. He moved deliberately, the rhythm of his steps syncing with his breath. In, 2, out, 3. Left boot, right, left boot. He stopped. The air had changed. It wasn't silence. Not really. The trees still creaked. His own footsteps still sounded. But something had been removed, a frequency missing. No bird calls, no squirrels, no dry leaf scuttles. Just hush. He turned slowly, eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing. But still. That sensation in his chest, like someone had hit pause on the world. Then, from far ahead, a sound. Not a growl, not a cry, a knock. Short, hollow, wood on wood. He waited, held his breath. Nothing. Just as he exhaled, another knock, this one softer. Then silence again. No wind, no leaves. He told himself it was a tree branch, falling. Maybe a limb hitting another as it came down. But his heart was ticking faster. He walked on, but slower now. The trail narrowed, the roots thicker. He rounded a bend and saw the trees open up slightly to his left. Light spilled through in wide shafts, catching particles in the air that looked like gold dust. He stood there just a moment, just enough time to question everything. A raven passed overhead, then vanished. He didn't believe in signs. Never had. But for some reason, as he looked past that shaft of golden light, deeper into the place the trail forgot, he thought again of what the old woman said. Don't step past the line. What line? He shook the thought, walked forward. The knocking didn't return, but neither did the birds. That night he pitched his tent near a shallow creek, cooked dehydrated beans over a jet burner. No fire, just protocol. He wrote his notes, checked his vitals, blood pressure, pulse, sipped half a whiskey flask and lay down. Sleep didn't come easy. It wasn't fear, not yet. But something about the air felt unfinished. Just before he drifted off, he thought he heard it again, wood on wood, just once. Like a door closing far off, down a hallway with no house. By late afternoon, the forest had changed. Not in the obvious ways. A tree fallen across the trail or a shift in the weather, but in something deeper, subtler. like a room you'd been sitting in for hours that suddenly went quiet, and you couldn't say what had stopped, only that it had. Graham noticed it halfway through the ridge path, somewhere between the marked rock face and the stream that only ran during heavy snowmelt. He had walked 6 miles already, boots sure and steady, the rhythm of the hike grounding him like clockwork. But now each step felt just a little off. Not wrong, not yet, just thinner. The air was cooler here, though the sun still slid through the canopy in angled streaks of gold. It painted long shadows that reached like fingers across the underbrush. Branches swayed gently in the breeze, but there was no sound. No birdsong, not even the high chatter of squirrels. Just the occasional creak of old pine wood above and the dry rustle of his own pack. He stopped on the trail and listened. Really listened. Nothing. He blinked against the brightness, scanning the tree line. To the left, the slope dropped steeply into a shallow ravine, thick with sword fern and deadfall. To the right, the land climbed into tight stands of lodgepole pine, but neither side moved. No chipmunks darting, no flies buzzing near the water trickling over stone. Just stillness. The kind that didn't feel like peace. He adjusted the strap on his shoulder and pressed forward. 10 minutes later, he caught it. The sudden burst of movement up ahead. Not on the trail, but in the trees above it. A cluster of birds, jays maybe, or growbeaks, launched out from a branch like they'd been startled from sleep. Wings beating fast, they fled in the same direction, up and away, not scattering like usual, but moving as one. A coordinated retreat. He paused again, heart thudding. Animals don't do that unless they have a reason. And suddenly he understood what was wrong. This silence wasn't the forest at rest. It was the forest in retreat, a pulling back, like the entire woods were holding their breath. He felt it behind his sternum, the same way you feel a pressure shift before a thunderstorm. Except this wasn't weather, this was presence. He crouched instinctively, one hand brushing the dirt, eyes searching for sign. That's when he saw it, partially in the trail, half lost under pine needles. A boot print, not his. It was fresher, deeper at the toe, like someone had paused mid-step, adjusted their weight, then turned. The tread wasn't familiar. Not a hiker's vibram sole, but something flatter. Worn. Graham followed the impression with his eyes. It curved off trail, into the woods. The direction of the birds. Another print nearby, heel dragging, then gone. He scanned for more. Found them. A dozen feet away, then another set, not quite aligned. It wasn't a straight walk. Whoever it was had moved irregularly. Stop and go. Shifting course every few steps. A pattern of someone circling, not traveling. A chill ran up the back of his neck. He stood slowly. This wasn't someone out for a walk. Graham picked up pace, boots quiet on the dirt, moving with purpose but not panic. The trail ahead narrowed between 2 large boulders, one of which he remembered from his last trip. A lichen-covered slab that caught the afternoon sun. He moved past it quickly and kept climbing. Then something moved just at the edge of his vision. Not above, not large. Low to the ground, fast. He spun, pulse spiking. Nothing, just trees. But the image lingered in his mind. Something small, low-slung, brown maybe, slipping between ferns like water. Too fast for a bear, too small for a deer, and silent. A cougar? That made sense. They stayed low. Tracked hikers sometimes. Rare attacks, but not unheard of. His hand instinctively went to the multi-tool clipped to his hip. Not a weapon, but it gave his fingers something to hold. The air thickened again, the smell of wet bark, of something stirred. He pushed forward, taking the trail faster now, though his breath had shortened. The sounds of his boots seemed louder, sharper, echoed back too quick. Then it happened. A breath. Not his, not behind him, but close. So close he felt it tickle the back of his neck, like a whisper with no voice. He turned, hard, sharp. Nothing. No shadow, no animal, no wind. Only the trees, tall and still. His mouth went dry. Graham tried to laugh it off, force the adrenaline back into place, but his hands were already clenched. He backed up slowly until he felt the trail underfoot again, then turned and walked, faster this time, his pack jostling. His boots caught roots. He stumbled once, caught himself, then stopped again. Where the hell was the trail? He spun around. The rocks behind him, gone. The narrow bend, the mossy boulder. It wasn't here. He'd veered. Somewhere back along the switchbacks, or maybe when he saw the birds. He must have gone off trail without noticing. It didn't make sense. He never lost track. Not once in 15 years. But now he had. He looked for markers, cut branches, any sign of where the path had been. There was none. The forest around him looked the same in every direction. The same trees. The same hush. Only now, that hush had a weight to it. He sat down on a flat rock, breathing hard, then pulled the map from his side pocket. Tried to orient himself. Nothing fit. Landmarks were too generic. The sun was lowering, casting light sideways through the pine trunks like long golden blades. He stood again, turned north by his compass, and tried to backtrack. But every step felt like a guess. Each turn led to another wall of identical trees. The slope dipped where it shouldn't. A fallen log that wasn't there before blocked his path. He kept moving, not out of panic, but purpose. He'd trained for this. He'd worked with field auditors in worse places. He'd tracked lost claims adjusters in Montana during snowmelt. He knew how to think under pressure. So why was his throat dry? Why were his fingers twitching? It wasn't just the trees. It was something else. A sense of being watched, not hunted, not followed, but measured, observed, weighed. He paused again and crouched low near a clearing, listening. And there, through the hush, he heard it again. That breath. Only this time, it wasn't close. It was moving. To his left, then behind, then gone. He stayed frozen for a full minute, back pressed against a tree trunk, barely breathing. Then, slowly, he reached into his pack, took out the emergency flare, but didn't crack it yet. It was too early for that. The forest exhaled again, not with sound, with pressure. And Graham, who didn't believe in signs or stories, tightened his grip on the flare and whispered something he hadn't said in years. "Where am I?" The woods did not answer. They only waited. He didn't realize he was running until his breath caught in his throat like a swallowed coin. The forest blurred. Branches clawed at his sleeves. His boots struck roots with the heavy panic of instinct. Not reason, not logic. Just a pulse in the dark, thudding against bone. It wasn't fear of a mountain lion anymore. It was something older, something nameless. He told himself otherwise, over and over, between gasps. Just a cougar, just a shadow, just a lost trail and an overactive mind. But the words didn't stick. Not against the cold sweat crawling down his back, or the way his body was moving without orders. He didn't run like this. Graham Sutter didn't run from anything. The slope pitched suddenly downward. The earth beneath him slick with moss and soaked needles. He went down hard, boot first, then knee, then ribs. His hand reached for balance, caught nothing. The pack pulled him sideways, and in a blur of green and brown, and a sharp white flash behind his eyes, he hit bottom. A crack echoed inside him. Not a stick, not the forest. His leg. Pain ripped up his shin like lightning through rebar. Hot, blinding, real. He gasped, tried to push himself up, but the limb beneath him wouldn't respond. It bent where it shouldn't, twisted with the sick resistance of something undone. His breath came in shallow bursts now. Not fear, pain. Deep and immediate and wrong. He lay there for a minute, or maybe longer. The canopy above swayed gently, unaware. The world had returned to stillness, but this time it didn't feel like silence. It felt like abandonment. His hands trembled as he sat up. Carefully, slowly. He didn't scream, but it was close. The kind of sharp, swallowed sound that echoed inside your skull. His left leg dragged behind him like dead weight. His right hand shook as he pulled the cuff up, swelling already. He knew enough about anatomy to recognize the shape beneath the skin wasn't right. Fibula. Probably a clean break, but it could be worse. No bone through skin, no bleeding. Yet. He reached into his side pouch, pulled out the emergency compression wrap. His fingers fumbled the fabric. He took a breath, counted to 3, and pressed. The pain bloomed like fire. The forest remained still. When he opened his eyes, sweat had soaked through his shirt. His ears rang. He reached for the flask at his belt, uncapped it, drank deep. Just whiskey. Not enough, but it dulled the edges. He looked around. The slope he'd fallen from loomed above, steep and slick. No way back that way. He was in a shallow basin, ringed by trees, thick with fern and dead branches. Light filtered through the high canopy in soft columns. Dust motes danced in the shafts like aimless fireflies. Then something caught his eye, a thin line, right across the path where he'd tumbled. He narrowed his gaze, heart suddenly ticking again. The line wasn't natural. It stretched taut between 2 saplings, maybe 6 inches off the ground, nearly invisible. He dragged himself closer. A wire. Not rope, not vine. Thin steel, almost thread-like. The kind used for snares or trip alarms. Carefully looped, anchored, almost artfully hidden beneath leaves. He stared at it. This wasn't nature. This was someone's doing. His mind went cold. If he'd fallen a foot left, he'd have hit it. Or maybe he had. Maybe it had been meant to steer, not catch. Shift his fall just so. He followed the line with his eyes to a second point of anchoring. Low to the tree. Fresh scarring in the bark. Someone had set this recently. He reached toward it, but thought better. No gloves. No way to check without leaving prints. And something in his gut told him not to disturb it. He backed away, dragging himself to a tree trunk. Sat there, breathing. What kind of person sets snares on a hiking trail? Not for animals, not like this. He looked up toward the canopy. The light had changed again. Warmer now. Deeper gold. Afternoon was slipping. A breeze shifted the branches. Somewhere to his left, leaves rustled. Footsteps? No, softer than that. Still, he listened. And there it was. The sound of motion. Careful, deliberate. Not rushing toward him. Not running away. Moving around. Not like a hunter chasing prey, but like something encircling, mapping. He held still. No bird moved, no squirrel barked. He wasn't alone. His hand reached slowly for the multi-tool at his hip. Again, not a weapon, but something. His knuckles whitened around it. He forced a breath through his nose, measured, steady. Who was out here? He thought of the print from earlier. The tread, the stop-start pattern. Now this wire, this path, this movement. Too smart for an animal. Too quiet for a drunk. This wasn't an accident. Someone was playing a game. His eyes scanned the tree line. Shadows moved, but nothing stepped out. The air had weight again, like before. Except now he wasn't standing. Now he couldn't run. Another sound. To his right. The faintest crunch. Leaves or breath. He pressed himself tighter to the tree trunk. Raised his knees as much as he could, leg throbbing in protest. A branch snapped. Not loudly, but close. He gritted his teeth. Come on, show yourself. But the forest didn't give, and neither did whoever was out there. Then, without warning, the sound receded. Not ran, withdrew, like it had gotten close enough, and decided. He waited 5 more minutes, then 10, nothing. The sun dropped lower, shadows stretched. His body ached, his stomach twisted. He hadn't eaten since noon. The adrenaline had burned everything. He needed shelter. But more than that, he needed something solid in his hand. He crawled to the edge of the basin, found a thick branch, dry and gnarled. Tested the weight, heavy, dense. He pulled it close, leaned against the tree, and waited. He didn't plan to sleep. Not here, not like this. But the body has its limits. And when the light finally dipped below the trees, and the warmth drained from the air, Something inside him surrendered. Not trust, not belief, just fatigue. Then a sound, soft, not behind him, in front, not heavy, not threatening. He blinked. A shape moved beyond the ferns, small, not human, but upright. A step closer. He held his breath. Then another step, and the eyes. Two black eyes, wide, curious, catching the last bit of amber light. Not animal, not savage. Watching, measuring, like him. Then the shape paused, and the forest held its breath once more. It stood there, barely taller than a middle schooler, half shadowed by ferns and shafts of dying light. The figure didn't flinch, didn't twitch, just watched him. Silent, curious, not an animal crouch, not the twitchy readiness of a predator, but something else, something Graham had no file for, no logic box to put it in, and it was looking right at him. His fingers closed tighter around the branch in his lap, not out of aggression, but instinct. His body still didn't trust what his mind couldn't explain. The thing stepped forward, just enough for the light to catch the shape of its head. Broad, rounded, covered in fine hair, reddish-brown, like copper wet from the rain. Its arms hung long, slightly bent, with hands that looked too human to be animal, too relaxed to be threat. The eyes were what did it. Wide, ink black, no whites, but not blank. They held shape, focus, emotion. They blinked, and it tilted its head. Not sharply, not theatrically. Just enough to suggest awareness. Not curiosity like a cat's, but like a child's. Graham didn't move. His breath had slowed, not because the pain was gone. It wasn't. His legs still pulsed like a drumbeat. But something deeper had taken over. Not calm, not fear, just presence. He was completely present. The small figure took another step forward, brushing aside a low fern with one hand. The gesture was delicate, purposeful, not brute strength. It didn't stomp or grunt. It didn't test the air with its nose. It just stood there, watching. Then it pointed, not wildly, not some vague gesture. Its hand lifted slowly, then extended, palm down, two long fingers aiming straight toward Graham's swollen ankle. Graham looked down, then back up. The eyes were still on him, but now waiting. He swallowed. "You see it, huh?" His voice broke in the stillness like a stone in water. The creature didn't flinch, but the eyes blinked again, slower this time. Then it made a sound, not from its throat, but from somewhere deeper. A short hum, barely audible. Less a word than a thought pushed outward. It didn't step closer. Instead, it crouched, low, balanced, elbows on knees. Still watching. Graham stared back, his hand slowly letting go of the branch. He didn't even remember doing it. The weight slipped from his lap and rolled to the side. He didn't feel vulnerable. He just felt seen. The creature's eyes shifted, tracking the branch as it rolled. Then back to his leg. It sniffed, not with its nose, but a shallow breath through its lips, like gauging something from the air. Graham watched its shoulders tense, then ease, and then it looked down at something on the ground. Its hand moved, brushing back another fern. There, between them, was the thin wire again. The same kind of trap that nearly got him before. The creature stared at it, eyes narrowed, not afraid, just cautious. Then it made a sound, a breath through its teeth, short and low. It stepped back, a full step, away from the wire. Then it looked at Graham again, and he understood something unspoken. It knew what it was, what that line meant. That it didn't belong to the forest, that it hurt, and it didn't cross it. Graham felt the cold air settle deeper into his chest. This thing, whatever it was, understood the difference between the forest and something that wasn't supposed to be there. The creature stood again, not fast, not slow, like it was trying not to startle him. Then it turned, just a shift of the body, and disappeared into the ferns. Graham almost called out. Almost. But the word stopped in his throat. and silence returned. The sun dipped lower. The sky, through the canopy, had turned the color of old pennies. His ankle throbbed like a warning bell. His throat was dry again, and he was alone. Or so he thought. The rustling came back 5 minutes later. Same direction, same careful steps. Graham tensed, then let himself breathe. It returned, not empty-handed. In its cupped palms were two things: moss and leaves, crushed into a dark pulp that oozed between its fingers. It stepped lightly around the wire this time, making sure its toes didn't graze the trap. Then it crouched again. Not close. Just near enough that Graham could see the mixture in its hands. It looked up, met his eyes, then down to his leg, then back up. The message couldn't have been clearer. It was asking, not assuming, not demanding. It waited. Graham shifted, bracing his back harder against the tree, and nodded once. A slow, shaky breath left his lips. The creature moved forward, quiet, smooth. It placed the mixture gently on the ground between them, never looking away. Then it pointed at the ankle, at the greenish mash, and waited again. Graham reached out slowly, but before he could touch it, the creature raised its hand. Flat palm, stop. Then it picked up a small bundle of grass, wiped its own hands clean on it, and gestured. He understood. Clean first. Even in the dirt, even in the wild, it wanted this to be done right. Graham tore the leg of his hiking pant open wider. The skin was red, purple beneath, swollen, raw. The cold sweat had dried and come back twice. He wiped the worst of it away with his sleeve. Then, hand shaking, he reached for the poultice. The moment his skin met the mash, he flinched. Not from pain, from cold. It was shockingly cold, like snowmelt on bare skin. The burn of swelling eased instantly. Not gone, but dulled. The pounding behind his kneecap softened, like someone turning down the volume dial inside his body. He looked up. The creature was still there, still crouched, watching him. It tilted its head once more, not questioning, just acknowledging. Then it reached out slowly and mimed a breath. In, out. Then placed one long finger to its own chest, then to Graham's. Graham stared. A message. Breathe. He did. A full breath, then another. And for the first time in what felt like hours, the woods didn't feel like they were leaning in. They just existed. Quiet. Alive. Graham lowered his head against the tree bark, closed his eyes. Not from exhaustion, from gratitude. When he opened them again, the creature was gone. But the pain was less. And for a man who didn't believe in miracles, that meant more than he wanted to admit. Somewhere behind him, the wire still glinted in the low light. But between his leg and the earth, something green and healing now pressed gently against his skin. And in the trees, something small had chosen to come back. Morning hadn't come yet, but something in the light had shifted. Not brighter, just less dark. That in-between hush before the sun starts climbing. Graham stirred beneath the pine boughs he'd pulled over himself like a makeshift blanket. The cold had settled into his bones, but not the way he feared. Not biting. Just a reminder that he was still alive. Still in one piece, more or less. His leg throbbed in long, slow pulses. Tolerable now, like something angry, but no longer screaming. He reached down and touched the poultice. It hadn't dried. Still damp, slightly sticky, and cold. As if the leaves had remembered the snowmelt from some other mountain. It didn't burn, didn't sting, just pulsed gently under his skin, like it knew what to do. He shifted and winced, bracing himself against the nearest tree. Every move still hurt, but the edge was gone. He could breathe without clenching his jaw. He could think. The air around him was quiet, but not dead. Somewhere above, a single bird chirped, sharp and distant. A good sign. The forest was breathing again. Whatever silence had fallen the day before, it had lifted. Not fully, but enough. Then he heard it. A soft patting on damp earth. No snap of twigs, no heavy weight, just careful movement, deliberate. He didn't startle. He just waited. And then it appeared again. The small one. Same reddish fur, same low posture. Arms longer than human, but not swinging wild like an ape. The shoulders hunched slightly forward, not from fear, but attention. Its eyes scanned the trees first, then Graham, then his leg, then back to the trees. It was alert. Something about that unsettled him more than the silence had. The creature moved closer, slower this time. Its breath came in shallow flutters, nostrils just barely widening. It crouched beside a fern, then reached for something. Bark, moss, a small flat stone. It held it for a moment, then sniffed again, placed it down, watched, and Graham realized it wasn't just here to check on him. It was listening to something else. He turned his head, held his breath. Nothing. But the look on its face, the way its body lowered just an inch more, the way its ears twitched toward the south tree line. It knew something was wrong. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, came a sound so faint he nearly missed it. Metal. Just a tick. Not a clank, not a crash. Just metal on metal. Subtle, like the faint scrape of a hook, or a spring releasing tension. The creature froze. Its entire frame went still in a way that didn't feel animal at all. Not a survival freeze. Not fear. This was thought. Calculation. Then it made a sound. Low. Barely audible. A grunt, not from fear, but warning. A short breath pushed from its chest. Not vocal, resonant. The air shifted. The metallic noise didn't come again. Whatever had been there backed off. And Graham knew, in the marrow of his bones, that it had heard the sound too. And it had chosen to leave. The creature stayed crouched, still listening, but its shoulders dropped just slightly. Then it turned back to him. Its gaze settled on the poultice, then on his face. Graham nodded almost involuntarily. You scared it off, didn't you? No answer, of course, but the creature moved closer now. Still slow, still respectful. It reached out one hand toward his leg, but stopped just before touching. Waited. Graham didn't flinch, and still it hesitated. It wanted permission. He gave it with a small, slow blink. Its hand pressed lightly against the swelling, testing the edge of the injury. The pressure was gentle, not prodding, just contact. And the moment it touched the skin, something strange happened. He didn't brace. His body didn't resist, because it didn't feel like a stranger's touch. It felt like care, measured, precise. Then it did something Graham didn't expect. It placed its hand on his shin, then tapped twice, lightly, then backed away. Not in fear, in deference, like it was giving him back to himself. He sat there dazed, then looked toward the trap still stretched low through the brush. He followed its line with his eyes, then beyond it. To the trees, to the place where he'd heard the metal. He saw it clearly now. This wasn't some lost child in the woods. This was something hiding him, protecting him from whoever had strung that wire, whoever had been circling, watching. And the realization hit deep. It hadn't just found him. It had chosen to help, to step out from cover, to risk being seen. He didn't know why, but it had. The creature stood again. Its head turned sharply toward the east. Its nostrils flared once. Alert! Something was moving again. It stepped closer to Graham, just one stride, and let out another low pulse from its chest. Short, rhythmic. Not for him, for the woods. It repeated it, lower this time. Then waited. Nothing moved. Then, somewhere faint, something changed. Like a breath being held too long finally let go. The tension broke. Graham didn't know how he knew, but he felt it. Whatever had been watching retreated, and the small one had made that happen. Without raising a hand, without showing its teeth, without speaking a single word. He sat there in silence, unable to say anything. His throat tightened. Not from fear, from something older. Gratitude he didn't know how to carry. The creature didn't look back. It turned toward the tree line and began to move away. No rush, no panic. It didn't look like it was leaving forever. More like it had done what it came to do, and it was letting the forest take the next shift. But halfway through the brush, it paused, turned slightly, and looked back. Their eyes met again, and Graham, who hadn't prayed in years, felt something catch in his chest. Because kindness, real kindness, doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need applause. It just acts and disappears into the trees. He leaned back slowly, the cold ground cradling his spine. The pain was still there. The trap still glinted behind the ferns, and the shadows beyond the trail still held questions he couldn't answer. But the ache inside him, something older than the broken bone, older than the distrust, older than the voice in his head that always needed proof. That ache had gone quiet. Not gone, but listening. And for now, that was enough. Darkness in the mountains comes slow. Then, all at once. One moment the forest glows like something half-remembered. Gold on bark, soft blue caught in needles. And the next, the light folds into itself like a breath held too long. Graham didn't see the sun disappear. He just noticed when the shadows stopped reaching and simply became the world. He sat against the same wide pine, knees drawn close, the branch he'd used earlier still beside him like a companion. The pain in his leg had dulled to a low heat, steady and manageable, thanks to whatever was in that leaf pulp the creature had left. His hands rested limp across his lap. The woods weren't dead, just waiting. The same way a hospital room goes quiet after the last visitor leaves. Not empty, not forgotten, just aware. It wasn't cold enough to kill, but it was the kind of cold that reminded a man how close he lived to the edge. He could feel the damp rise from the soil beneath him, curling through his shirt into the spine. He pulled his jacket tighter, adjusted the folded map beneath his hip. That and a piece of protein bar were the only comforts he had left. And yet, he felt more watched than alone. Somewhere above him, an owl stirred. Not calling, just a faint rustle. Graham didn't look up. His eyes were fixed on the dark. Because it was in the dark that the small one returned. Not with sound, with presence. It didn't walk into the clearing. It was just there. A rustle behind the tree line, a low exhale, and then that familiar form, half shadow, half shape, emerged again, crouched and quiet, just beyond reach. It didn't move toward him right away. It sat, not to rest, to keep watch. Its back was straight, shoulders slightly forward, palms to the dirt. Ears perked toward the woods behind Graham, as if listening to a frequency he couldn't hear. A coat of leaves and distant steps. The night wasn't still. It just spoke a language only some could understand. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. Something passed between them anyway. Minutes turned to hours, or something like hours. Time bent in places like this. Graham felt it stretch, then compress, then vanish altogether. He closed his eyes once, maybe twice, just to blink. But then they opened slower. The weight of the day pressed behind them. He didn't know why he spoke. Maybe it was the silence, maybe the dark, or maybe it was something deeper. A crack in the armor, split open by pain and quiet, and that impossible kindness. But his voice came, low and dry. I shouldn't have left the trail. The words sounded odd, like someone else had said them. The creature turned its head slightly. Didn't move, didn't blink. Graham swallowed. My sister used to say the forest doesn't care what you believe, that it just keeps going. With or without us. Still no response, just those eyes, watching, absorbing. He exhaled hard. She believed in everything, ghosts, signs, all of it. I told her it was poison, all that believing. I thought if you only followed what could be proved, you'd never get fooled. His voice cracked, just barely. I was wrong. The woods didn't answer. But they listened, and that was enough. The creature stood, not suddenly, not to alarm him, just quietly rising, one fluid motion. It took a step forward, then another. Its feet made no sound, even on the pine needles. Graham tensed without meaning to. It paused, waited, then kept moving. It stopped just in front of him now. He could see it clearly in the starlight. Its shoulders broad, covered in thin layers of reddish fur that shifted in texture across its arms. Its breath came slow and deep. Its chest moved not with urgency, but control. It didn't dominate the space, it inhabited it. Then, without ceremony, it reached into the pouch at its side, a fold of fur or moss woven with sap, and pulled out a single small leaf, smooth-edged, dark green, still wet. It didn't hand it to him. Instead, it reached out gently and pressed the leaf flat against Graham's chest, just over the sternum. The pressure was firm. Then it let go. Graham looked down, then back up. But the creature was already backing away. Not in retreat, just returning to its place near the tree, reclaiming its post, its role. A guardian. Graham didn't touch the leaf. He didn't have to. It wasn't medicine. It was a reminder. To breathe. And so he did. Slow, deep, quiet. He closed his eyes, and this time, he wasn't afraid to fall. He didn't sleep, but he rested, and the forest watched. Later, maybe an hour, maybe more, he stirred to movement, not from the small one, but something beyond. The creature turned sharply, body taut. Graham's pulse spiked, there, in the dark. A sound. Footsteps. Not animal, heavier. Measured. Boots. He held his breath. The creature stood now, fully upright. Taller than Graham had expected. Nearly his own height, but wider, more built. It stepped between Graham and the sound, planted its feet firm in the soil. The noise came again, a crunch, a slow shift of weight. Closer. The creature didn't run, didn't crouch. It stood like a wall, between Graham and whatever watched from the trees. Another sound now, a breath, not from the creature, from the trees. Ragged. Human. Graham reached slowly for the branch beside him. The creature turned its head slightly, just enough to register the motion. Then, without a word, without a sound, it pulsed again. That same deep chest-thrown breath, the kind that doesn't come from the throat. It vibrated through the clearing, not loud, but certain, a signal, a line, and on the edge of the woods, everything stopped. Then, one step, two, gone. The presence receded. Graham didn't move, couldn't. The small one stepped back toward him. Not fast, not slow, just enough. It didn't speak. But its eyes met his again, and in them, Graham saw something that burned beneath the fur, beneath the shape. Will. It had chosen to stay, to guard, to protect, despite everything, despite fear. It had stayed. Graham felt the ache in his throat again, but this time he let it rise. Not tears, not words, just breath. Drawn in, let out. He looked down at the leaf on his chest. Still there, still cool, still reminding. The creature sat again, and this time Graham leaned slightly forward. Not to reach, not to touch, but to witness. And in that strange clearing, deep in the Ochoko woods, something settled that had been shaking for years. A kind of peace not found in belief, but in being seen, fully, quietly, without demand. And when the night deepened, when even the stars seemed to hush, Graham let his head rest back against the bark. The pain in his leg was still there, but he didn't feel alone. Not anymore. By the time first light broke through the trees, Graham had already been awake for what felt like hours. Not from pain, not fear. Something else. A kind of quiet alertness. The kind a man carries after he's been changed by something he still can't name. The sky had turned the color of riverstone, soft and washed in gray. Not sunrise yet, just the earliest edge of it, when the world exhales, and the forest begins to remember itself. He blinked slowly. The ache in his ankle was still there, but the sharpness had dulled to something distant. It throbbed like a bruise now, not a break. The poultice clung tight to the skin, holding firm, cold as ever. His breath came easier in the morning air, and in that breath he realized the small one was still there. Not beside him, but close, perched a few yards away near a stand of alder, half hidden behind thin branches, like a figure waiting for permission to vanish. Its body was folded into itself, knees drawn in, arms slack but ready, watching but not staring, present but not demanding to be seen. Graham shifted, slow and careful. His hands braced against the dirt, every movement deliberate. The creature didn't move. It only tilted its head slightly as if to say, "You're still here." And Graham felt the weight of that land settle in his chest. He didn't speak. Words had become too small. So he nodded, and the creature stood. Not with urgency, not like it was leaving, but like something had begun. It stepped closer, feet soft on the forest floor. Its body caught in a shaft of gold that had just begun to warm the pine bark. The light curved across its shoulder and danced in the strands of reddish hair along its arms. Dust floated around it like pollen in spring. It knelt down just in front of him and pointed. One long finger, slow, precise, toward the slope behind them, toward the edge of the basin. Then it swept its hand, palm low, across the ground in a wide arc. Graham understood. There's the way out. But not just any way. Stay low. Stay within the line. He didn't ask how it knew. Didn't question why this wild thing understood direction and geography better than any map he could carry. He just felt it. Trusted it. The creature tapped its own chest once, then gently touched the earth, then pointed again to Graham and the ground beneath him. It was a message. This is yours now too, for this moment. You're a part of this line. Then, without ceremony, it stepped back, just far enough to stand again. It looked at him with eyes that were deeper than their darkness should allow. And then, it did something Graham didn't expect. It reached out, not to help him up, but to say goodbye. Its hand moved in a gesture that was unfamiliar, but felt sacred. Fingers bent, then touched its own chest. Then it touched the space near Graham's heart. Didn't press, didn't graze skin. Just hovered, and then it pulled away. That was the goodbye. Not in words, in something older. Then it stepped back again, gaze lifting now toward the forest. And it made a sound, short, high, like a bird call, but not quite. The kind of sound that didn't carry far, but was meant for something already listening. And the forest answered. From deep beyond the trees, something responded. Not a roar, not a growl. Something deeper. A call, low and long, like a cello string plucked from the bones of the mountain. Graham's breath caught. That wasn't the small one's voice. It was larger, wider, older, and suddenly he knew. They had never been alone. Not really. This was territory, and the others had been there all along. Watching, waiting. The creature looked back at him one last time, and this time, in the thin light of dawn, Graham saw it fully. Not just a shape, not a mystery, a child who had once been hurt. Because there, just above its left wrist, beneath the fur, was a patch of scarred skin, bare, pinkish, old, but not forgotten. It was a mark. Of a trap, maybe, or fire, or something man-made. It had known pain, and still it had returned. Still it had chosen kindness, and that was what undid Graham. Not the size of it, not the mystery, but that quiet, stubborn grace. The creature turned. Its shoulders shifted like water as it moved back into the green. Not rushed, not hiding, just going home. And Graham stayed, for a long time, long enough to feel the sun rise past the canopy and warm the side of his face, long enough to feel the forest exhale, long enough to understand he wasn't meant to follow. He turned back toward the direction the creature had pointed, and he began to crawl. Each inch forward was fire in his leg, but he didn't stop. He pulled himself across the soft floor of needles and moss toward the light, not toward escape, toward return. And as he moved, he stayed inside the invisible boundary the small one had drawn. He didn't stray, not even once. It wasn't fear, it was respect. Somewhere behind him, the forest sang again, a low vibration through bark and stone. Not goodbye, just distance, just space. A gift given, a circle closed. He paused at the edge of the rise, pulled himself up enough to see the slope beyond. And then he looked back one last time. Nothing. No movement, no shadow. But the silence, it felt different now. Not empty, just full of things that no longer needed to prove they were there. And that was the last moment he cried. Not loudly, not long, just enough. Just enough to make room for what was new. Then he pulled forward and didn't look back again. By late morning, the sun had fully arrived. It came in slow across the Ochocos, dragging golden warmth over the peaks like honey poured from a great height. Graham kept moving, inch by inch, foot by aching foot. The pain was a rhythm now, steady and familiar. Not kind, but not cruel either. Just there, like gravity. He used a long stick, part branch, part crutch, carved into his hand by necessity. It wasn't grace that moved him forward. It was resolve. Something older than pain. Something that had been carved in him long before he'd ever stepped into those woods. His pack dragged behind him, lighter than before, most of it abandoned. What mattered now was the direction. He followed it with the kind of attention only fear and respect could teach. He didn't veer, didn't test his luck. The edge of the invisible line still burned in his memory, marked not with signs, but with silence. A silence he understood now. It wasn't emptiness, it was protection. Around midday, the trees thinned. The angle of the sun struck the bark in a new way. Flatter, harsher. He paused beside a fallen log, breath shallow, eyes blurred with sweat and thirst. Somewhere nearby, a woodpecker tapped out its rhythm, indifferent to his crawling return. That indifference, oddly, brought him comfort. Nature had returned to its routines. That meant he was almost out. He didn't collapse when he saw the gravel road. He didn't cry. He just stopped moving, stared at the winding dirt path as if it were a ghost. Then he kept going. 10 more steps, 20. The road didn't speak, didn't welcome him. It simply existed. And after everything, that was enough. The sound of tires on loose gravel reached him before the engine did. A soft crunch, a slow climb. Then a dust-coated Subaru rounded the bend. He raised one hand, not high, just enough. The car stopped with a jolt, brakes squealing slightly. The driver, a young woman in a park ranger uniform, stepped out fast, her face already folding into alarm.
"Sir, you okay?"
Her voice was sharp, real, human. He nodded, barely. Then dropped the stick. Everything after that came in pieces. She called it in. He was taken down to the ranger station, wrapped in blankets, handed lukewarm water and more questions than he could answer. He said he'd fallen, sprained or fractured, lost his bearings, left the trail. That part was true. He said nothing about what he saw. That part stayed where it belonged. By the time he reached the small clinic in Dayville, the swelling had gone down just enough to see the strange coloring beneath. Purple, but not deep. Yellowing at the edges. Dr. Lenora Cates raised an eyebrow when she removed the makeshift wrap. "This looks less angry than it should," she muttered, mostly to herself. She pressed her fingers gently along the fibula. "Clean break. But the swelling's unusually controlled." Graham said nothing. She looked at the poultice still clinging to his skin. She frowned. "Did you pack this yourself?" "No." She paused. "Was someone with you?" He met her eyes. For the first time, he didn't answer with numbers or logic. "I had help." She nodded slowly, then peeled off the dried leaf layers, sniffing the blend as she did. Her expression changed. Not disbelief. Recognition. "I've seen this before," she murmured. "Or something like it. Back when I was doing rotations up near Fossil. There were stories about poultices made with wood sorrel and river moss. Old folks swore by it." She didn't press. She just wrapped the leg gently, methodically. And when she was done, she laid a hand on his shoulder and said, "Whoever helped you knew what they were doing." He nodded, but didn't speak. Later, at the general store, a man with a trucker hat and a cigarette behind his ear stepped up beside him near the coffee machine. Worn boots, steel belt buckle, voice like gravel soaked in diesel. "Hey," the man said. You been up toward Sandstone Ridge last few days? Graham didn't turn. Yeah. You see much?
Trees, rocks.
The man chuckled.
Sure. Just wondering. Got a couple buddies say they've been hearing strange noises up that way. Thought maybe you'd run into anything out of place.
Graham turned then, looked him in the eye. Calm, steady. Just the usual birds and shadows. The man squinted, then shrugged. Right. And walked out. Graham lingered, hand around the warm styrofoam cup. He watched the door swing shut, then stepped outside. The street was quiet. Late afternoon sun slid low across the roof lines. A dog barked once from behind a porch. Somewhere beyond town, the forest stood unchanged, distant, watching. He didn't go back. He wouldn't. Not out of fear, out of reverence. There are places that don't belong to us. Not in the way we think. They allow us in sometimes. For a moment. For a reason. And when the reason is done, you leave. That's the rule. He understood that now. Graham drove home 2 days later, leg braced, windows down. The road unwound in front of him like thread pulled loose from a life he no longer wanted sewn back together the same way. He stopped once, just past Mitchell, on the shoulder overlooking the foothills. He stepped out of the car and stood there, leaning heavy on his cane. The air smelled like pine and dust. And something else. A memory. Not of words, of silence. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small dried leaf. The same kind the creature had pressed to his chest. Still cool to the touch. Still shaped like breath. He held it there for a moment, then let it fall. Watched it tumble once in the wind, then vanish into the grass. He didn't need it anymore. It had done its part. At home, weeks later, he told no one the full story. He returned to work briefly, then left again. Not for the mountains, but for the spaces between. Places where wonder didn't need proof to exist. Where kindness lived quiet. Where belief wasn't something you confessed, but something you protected. At night sometimes, he would stand on his back porch and look east, toward the darkness where the hills rolled off into forever. And he would remember, not the creature, but the choice it made. To come close, to see him, to offer help without promise, and to vanish without thanks. And that was all the evidence he ever needed. That something good still waited in the world, even in the places no one believed in anymore, even in the silence, especially in the silence. So if you're listening now, and something inside you has been torn or hollowed or left behind, maybe this story found you for a reason. Maybe you were meant to hear it. You don't have to believe in anything to understand what it means to be saved. You just have to be willing to stay quiet when the forest stops breathing. And listen for the thing that stays when everything else runs. The thing that doesn't need your trust, but chooses to offer you kindness anyway. Just don't cross the line. And if you do, remember what waited there. And carry it out with you. Not in your hands, in the way you walk back into the world. Sometimes, what stays with us the longest isn't what we saw, but what we felt when no one else was looking. A presence we can't explain. A silence that made us stop. A moment that shifted something deep inside, even if we never found the words to name it. The world teaches us early to chase facts, to measure things, to demand proof before we believe. And yet, some of the most important truths we carry aren't things we can hold in our hands. They're the weight of someone's kindness when we didn't deserve it. The memory of being watched over by something or someone we'll never see again. The stillness that comes not from fear, but from awe. There are places in this life that won't show up on any map. Places that protect themselves with quiet. They don't need our stories, our cameras, our footprints. They ask only that we pass through with humility, and that we leave with more respect than we arrived with. Maybe we don't need to explain everything. Maybe we just need to listen more. To the woods, to each other, to the parts of ourselves that still believe in mercy. Because what matters in the end isn't whether something was real by the world's definition, but whether it was real to us. Whether it changed the way we walk through the world. Whether it softened the hard edges. Whether it reminded us that the quietest things often carry the most truth. The most sacred boundaries aren't drawn in ink or fenced in wire. They're felt, known, respected. Not because we fear what's on the other side, but because we honor what lives there. And sometimes that's all that's needed. Not belief, not certainty, just respect, just presence, just enough stillness to hear the deeper rhythm beneath all the noise. So wherever you are tonight, whether you're walking through your own woods or standing at the edge of someone else's silence, may you be met with gentleness. May you give what you never received. And may you carry forward what can't be explained, but can still be shared. Thank you for spending this time with us. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you feel less alone, more seen, or simply reminded you to slow down, we'd be honored to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Tell us what you felt, what you remembered, what you still believe in. And if these quiet stories speak to you, consider subscribing to the channel so we can keep walking this path together. We don't need to believe the same things to walk with care. We just need to remember, kindness never needed proof to matter. And some things are real, simply because we treat them as sacred. Good night, dear listener. We'll see you in the stillness.